This is Susan Scott speaking. Thank you for joining me tonight for this slideshow that I put together called 82 Years and Counting, sort of the history of the Hawaii Audubon Society. I volunteered to do this slideshow tonight, thinking that what I would do is look through the past Elepios, pick out some highlights, and make this slideshow. But as I started, I realized that there's hundreds, I don't know how many hundreds of Elepios that are all really interesting. And so after a couple weeks, I had gone through only the 1940s, and I still hadn't gotten very far. So I'm just telling you this in the beginning because what I had to do was shorten things. I missed some things that are very important, and lots of people were involved that I'm not going to be able to include in this. So my apologies for that, but I did the best I can for the amount of time we wanted to make for this, which is only 20 minutes. So we're going to have a speed show through 82 years. The first Elapile had the interesting quote that says, birds are essential to man's continued life on the planet, which I thought was very nice. I've kind of pulled things out of some of the Elapiles. They're sort of hard to read, but these are some of the things that really struck me. The big thing that struck me from day one was the emphasis on the Hawaii Audubon Society's on education. So through the 1940s, the beginning of the 1940s, that is, the quote that I liked on one of the early Elepios was that let us learn wisdom from the birds before it's too late. And the other part of this Elapio had a piece about the photography and the beauty of birds. So rather than killing them for hunting for sport, that we should take advantage of sparing a joyous life by taking its picture. And if this isn't a joyous life, I don't know what is. This picture of this wedgie from Freeman Seabird Preserve that he's holding. Another one of the early Elepios had a Pacific golden plover. Interestingly, they never called it the kolea, which is what we all call it now by its Hawaiian name. And the picture they had is a picture from a stuffed bird from the Bishop Museum. And I just thought that was interesting because the photography nowadays is so different that it would be amazing to them to see that we take most of these excellent pictures on the left with our phones. So July 1940 membership was $1. That's what it started out. And the motto really was to safeguard all species threatened with extinction. And that was before they added the word native species. Yeah. March 1941 was 1941 was quite a year in Hawaii, and they had a photography competition, and this T.M. Blackman won this award for first prize for this white tern feeding its chick at Midway. And I just added my own picture this is not mine, but I found it in a dive shop on the North Shore, and it is unattributed, so we don't know who took this amazing picture. But things have changed a bit since the early Elepios, but we still have the same idea of these magnificent birds carrying so many fish to feed their chicks. Of course, that was just several months before the world changed in Hawaii, and I was interested to see what happened after December 7th, 1941. They got an issue out in January, February, which is amazing, and 1942, and apparently had to ask for permission to uh, publish the Elapio. And the first sentence says there's a place for the Hawaii Honolulu Audubon Society in this war. So that was interesting. I don't know where this picture is, but there was barbed wire on the beaches in Hawaii at the time. Mama Bay. This was continued through the war. They kept scheduling bird walks, Woodlawn Ridges in Manoa, and I thought it was interesting that they advise nailed shoes. This one stuck out to me as I was reading through because the name was changed here to the Hawaii Audubon Society from Honolulu to include the neighbor islands. They have this logo, kind of a new logo for the Elepiles, and the annual dues went up to $2 a year. The other thing that stuck out to me was the date, June 21st, 1948, where they're having a talk at the library of the Birds of Ponape, and it just stood out to me because that's my birthday. It's June 21st, 1948. So while my mother was laboring with me, giving me birth in life in Milwaukee, the people in Hawaii were talking about the Birds of Ponape. The 1950s was sort of the advent of big tourism in Hawaii. There's lots of ads about Hawaii, a lot of talk about visitors. It was another time when the state was introducing birds to control predators. So the state introduced the barn owl to control rats and mice, and the cattle egrets, and we know that has not turned out so well. In 1951, there was an article about introducing axis deer to Hawaii Island. They were already here in Hawaii. They're native to India. And Dr. Harold Lyons said that introduction would be disastrous. And someone suggested that we introduce Bengal tigers to control the axis deer. I think it was in joke, but it didn't really say it was a joke. But the comment on the Elepiles said it was not received with enthusiasm. That was pretty. The 1960s was a time of introductions, more introductions. The red-vented bobo, who we now see everywhere, was an unauthorized cage release. So were the ring-necked parakeets, both of which are now very common and causing some trouble to our native species. They also the state introduced the francolins for game hunting, so people would have something to shoot. Pico Lagoon was a topic of conversation or a topic of Elepaio in 1961, and where the Audubon Society urged the state to make it a sanctuary, and it took them 20 years and lots of lobbying, or I don't know, real lobbying, but suggestions from the Hawaii Audubon Society, and it did finally happen. It's now a wonderful refuge for our water birds and shorebirds. Stilts uh, were worried. People were worried about stilts in 1963, and the Hawaii Audubon Society urged the conservation-minded individuals to fight for the protection of the stilts. I love the picture. That's a picture from the Elepaio. Some people may know who those people are. I do not. I don't remember what the caption was. But it took till in 2021 that there is some protection of the wetlands, but the stilts we're still fighting for the stilts. And the U.S. Fish and Wildlife proposed downlisting them from endangered to threatened, and Hawaii Audubon Society was against it. 1965, there were only 30 nene left in the wild, and that started a captive breeding program from England and also in Hawaii, and that has been quite successful. In 2018, we had nearly 3,000, and in 2019, the species was downlisted from endangered to threatened. So our nene are a good success story. The first edition of Hawaii's Birds. This was a wonderful publication and not one that other Audubon societies published. So this was a very wonderful, great thing. And you can see it was a library book, this particular one. The 1970s, of course, was the Endangered Species Act, which began protecting plants and animals from extinction, and we are still living with the results of that, which many are successful, particularly our eagles. In 1975, the Hawaii Audubon Society changed their motto to the protection of Hawaii's native wildlife. And that was interesting to me that it took that long to sort of zero in on native wildlife. And the headline was, "Are introduced birds good or bad?" And I don't know that there's an answer to that. So somebody said to me once, if we didn't have introduced birds, we wouldn't be seeing any birds at all. And I have been to Guam, and that's quite a shocking thing to be in a place where there are no birds in the cities or in the trees, in the parks. This is Tom Fake's excellent photo of a red-billed leothrix introduced with our Kolea native. Second edition, 1975, and the dues went up to $3 a year. 1978 was the second edition, but a different cover, and so that was kind of confusing when we were looking for the covers of the earlier books. And interestingly, cover on this one is a banded meaning. But they changed the covers between printings, but we didn't make a new edition. Inside's the same. In the 1980s, the third edition came out for $3.95. Galley noodle. Then I had a personal experience with the Hawaii Audubon Society in 1981. My boyfriend, Craig, said, "Let's go to Hawaii." And I said, "Sure, okay, where's that?" I'd never been here and was really happy living in Colorado. But Craig was an intern. I was a nurse in Denver. And we came to Honolulu and visited his friend, Joel Smasco, who he had gone to school with. And Joel was married to Marie Morin, who was completely fretting the whole first couple days we were here over this thing called Elapaio. And they were doing pasting and typing, and in 1981 it was quite a chore, really. It still is, but it's different kind of chore. But anyway, I remember thinking, what is she going on about the Elapaio? But I did know about it, and I also see from that issue that the president was George Balaz, who I was soon to meet. So when we moved here, I went to University of Hawaii to study marine biology, and I see the board of directors meeting was at the home of Sheila Conant, who I got to know from UH. And this postcard is significant. It was being sold by Hawaii Audubon, and when I was in school at UH, I started my first crack at writing, and I had this article published about sea turtles in Cruising World in 1985, and George Balaz gave me this photo. So this was my first article ever published in a national publication, and it was a gift from George. 1984 was our third edition. This beautiful Laysan albatross gliding, which we now can see all winter at Kaina Point. In 1989 was the next edition, fourth edition, with Elapaio on the cover. In 1988, I had gotten to know Sheila Conant, was sort of considering graduate school, and she was going to be my advisor. And instead, I decided I wanted to be a writer of wildlife, and rather than a researcher. And so Sheila helped me with my first book. My notes paper column was called Ocean Watch, and Sheila helped me with some things in it. I don't remember exactly what, but she was great. And I asked her what I could pay her to help me, and she said, "Become a lifetime member of Hawaii Audubon." So I did. Craig and I got a family lifetime membership. This was two red-footed boobies landed on the aft deck of our sailboat, also I think 1986, and we took this picture, and I had no idea what they were or how to deal with them. They were totally friendly and just resting. We were way offshore near the Clipperton Islands, and we call this photo "Three Boobies on the Aft Deck." I was trying to give them fresh water and all kinds of things. 1990s, I was invited to be a judge for Paradise Pursuits, which was a program by the Hawaii Audubon Society, who hired Wendy Johnson. And that's when Wendy and I became friends. And they were using my high school textbook that I had written called Plants and Animals of Hawaii as one of the basic books for the quiz show. Wally Johnson was around in the early 90s. I think he was around a long time before that, but this was the first time that I had actually found a lapile that had talked about his banding, and I remembered actually reading this and looking for banded birds. And just as an aside, the banded bird is right now, Mr. X is at Punchbowl Cemetery, and Wally banded him 19 years ago, and said he might be older because he wasn't sure how old he was when he was banded. So Sigrid Southworth, who's also been around with Wally and Plovers and Audubon for decades, spotted him and got this great picture. So these are the Paradise Pursuits winners. And I remember these kids vividly and kind of wonder what they're doing now. They were from all these schools. I won't go through them all, but I remember the Kahuku kids were just great. I got to know them better than others. I'm not sure why, but it was really a fun program, and it was on Olelo on TV, so we could watch the competitions. Fifth edition came out in 1993. And besides birds, the Hawaii Audubon has been involved in the Pacific Fisheries Coalition, managed by Linda Paul and William Isla as the fisherman. And they started in 1998 and are still currently working with the fisheries. And I like William's quote. I've known William for a long time. If you claim to be a fisherman, be a proud fisherman. Know the resource, take only what you need, get involved, and pass on the knowledge. So it's words of wisdom to remember. And that is still going on. I had this poster in my office for a long time. It's beautiful. The other Marine association with Hawaii Audubon was very strong Hanauma Bay education program through Sea Grant, University of Hawaii, and they invited us many times to give talks. We'd have sort of a month of Hawaii Audubon talks, and these are just some of the programs that we gave. And our host was Gavin, who was great. He helped us, especially when we were trying to do it online for the first time. And I have to kind of hurry in through the end because I really was getting overwhelmed with so much information. And again, I really apologize for whoever and whatever I've left out, but maybe next year we'll all be together and we can do another one. But the 2000 and 2010 was a big decade for Hawaii Audubon. The left, of course, is a wedge-tailed shearwater chick, and that has to do with the Freeman Seabird Preserve. And remember CDs? We had CDs for sale. And I also, in 2001, was given an award, which really meant a lot to me. I was really, really proud of it, and it still hangs in my office. So thank you for that. 2005 was the 6th edition. And 2007 was this enormous gift from the Freeman Foundation of an acre of land where wedge-tailed shearwaters had just moved in on their own, and has since been gifted to the Hawaii Audubon Society, and is now an enormous asset, enormous part of life for all of us, and for the birds. And they had Audubon sponsored some soirees to raise money to help hire landscapers for the preserve to make it a nice place for the birds. I went to those. When I was doing this slideshow, I asked Suzanne Spiceberger if she would help me with the dues, because I kept thinking I kept losing track of how much they were. But the good news is that from 2013 to now, they're still $25 a year, and I think that's a pretty good bargain. This is not adjusted for inflation, but it's pretty straight line if it was adjusted. I have a lot of pictures of Ron Walker because the other thing I did when I was making this slideshow was to put it in some look in the office, and I found lots of posters of Ron, and he was very involved with the Audubon Society, and people celebrated his life with lots of big posters that I took pictures of to put in here. So he passed away at 80, and Ron just sent me this picture of Ron and his wife Shar, who I unfortunately didn't ever get to know. 2020 was our big 7th edition of the book, and of course now that we all know it and love it, we always look for it in the bookstores. The Menuaku Festival, we've partnered with Conservation Council to continue that. That's been going on for several years now, I think 6, and the one before last year was virtual, and this year was at the International Marketplace. And there's some Audubon people at the right. Wally's still visiting here and working with me on the Kalea account. What's happening right now is we're making new websites. We are in the process, so that will be coming up in 2022, both the main website for Hawaii Audubon and also for the Freeman Seabird Preserve. We're also getting a little more involved in keeping cats indoors or on the leash, which is what I saw just last week on the North Shore. This cat didn't mind the leash at all. And Wendy sent me this just a couple weeks ago. UH Professor Donald Drake gave us a shout out on Hawaii News Now about how Hawaii Audubon Society has been involved in many conservation programs. So this is the first El Pio and the most recent. Suzanne Spiceberger's been great, wonderful editor and putting it out, and it's just as much work as it was in the past. It's just different kinds of work now. We're continuing education. These are some of the many schools that we're reaching for talks and Kalea accounts and other things that Audubon's doing, because we still feel that all of us that education is really key. Just want to remind everybody that almost all of the Hawaii Audubon has been volunteer. So lots of people, everybody has other jobs and other lives and still take time to volunteer. And these are 2 of our extraordinary volunteers, David Harnbach and Michelle Hester, who spend lots and lots of their time at the Freeman Seabird Preserve with the wedge-tail, helping the wedge-tailed shearwaters. The other volunteers, this is the current board of directors, and we are all volunteers, and I just wanted to make sure that everyone got recognized, because it's a great group, and we've really had I've had a wonderful experience the last couple of years being on the board, and really look forward to the future. It's been a hard couple of years, and for everybody in all ways, and Audubon Society is no different. There's been things, all kinds of things that have to do, we can't meet anymore, and things are much harder. But I gave a talk at the Kaka'ako, a community center, about the Menuaku, the white terns. And while I was down in Kaka'ako, I saw this painted on the wall, and I like it so much that it keeps me laughing, and it keeps me moving, and realize that even though times are hard, great changes are coming, and so things are going to be better. So thank you for coming, tuning in, and hopefully next year we will be able to get together and see each other's faces, and it'll be a new year. So thanks. Goodbye.